black magic. Motorcycle engine, if it's running too rich, it runs colder, and as we said before, it can eventually it can even dilute the oil. You get excess bore wear because you're getting too much fuel flushing the oil in the bore.
What size jet do you think you would have to go to before it starts causing that type of damage?
I mean, it could be too rich on the needle, too rich on the slide, too rich on the main jet. Yeah, so just generally too rich on the float. There's a whole lot of factors with the carburetor that affect richness, all the different circuits. Not necessarily just one of them. You've got just a big rich main jet. It's more than one jet. It'll be a combination of everything being too rich.
A discussion we've had in the past, speaking about the carburetor, we've talked about it's a constant velocity carburetor, right? CV.
That's right, yeah.
Right.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the benefit of that carburetor is its ability to adjust the amount of fuel being pushed through depending on the altitude.
Yeah, they are altitude compensating.
Does the hole in the slide and the cut spring affect its ability to compensate the altitude?
Good question.
It might.
I expect it would. Possibly not so much the spring, but I would imagine the hole, the extra hole drilled in the bottom of the slide. I've had some bikes where we've had to actually refill the hole to get them to run correctly. I think they quite often drill this original hole that's in there bigger and then drill another one. This is a bit weird, but not every engine is the same, even though those DR650 is a DR650. But one engine can be made to run differently or will run differently to another one with an identical jetting set in it. What's good in one bloke's bike isn't necessarily what's good in the other bike. You can have two different jettings to make them run the same.
Mine was originally modded by someone else, but on the first ride I took to Sydney, when I started climbing the range from Newcastle towards Nowindock, I couldn't get over 80 kilometers an hour. At that time I had a big hole in my airbox, but I had stock jetting, if you remember when we took my carburetor apart, and I had a different needle and an extra hole in the slide. But as soon as I got to altitude, my bike started struggling. My bike wasn't modded correctly though.
Definitely not.
No, not at all.
As a wild guess, without actually experiencing what it was doing, I'd say it was running lean because it's got plenty of air there.
Yeah, because of the hole.
But the jetting is not rich enough to compensate for the air. Also, the velocity of the air was probably low, so your slide may not have been opening as well as it should. Like, that is a tuned carburetor airbox intake system on the DR650 in standard condition. By tuned, I mean it all depends on the snorkel, the volume of air that can be dragged through the snorkel at a certain throttle opening. The whole system is designed to work together, and that's why I'm fond of leaving it in stock sort of condition, because I know it works that way. It works for what it is. Hey, how you going? Vincestrang here. I get a lot of questions about the DR650 air filter, removing the snorkel on the top, why I always disagree. Just have a look at this. So I've had my bike out in the Simpson Desert, but you can see the remains of Spinifex grass seeds in there. This is my air filter. Pretty much, this is from the airbox side, pretty much all looking good. Get round the other side, and this is where the air intake goes in down that side when you use the snorkel. I had a chucks on the top, which of course makes a difference in oil, slightly oiled chucks. But the fact that the dirt goes in the snorkel and down right on the other side, and it faces down into the far side of the airbox and towards the bottom. Obviously, majority of the dirt goes down, hits the bottom of the airbox and doesn't come to the filter. You take that snorkel out and the dirty air, water, everything falls straight in the top of your airbox, right onto your air filter, chokes your bike, smothers your air filter up. Carburetor doesn't work properly unless it's tuned correctly. Leave that snorkel in and your filter will stay cleaner for much longer. We were out for 2 weeks. If there was no snorkel in there, the air filter would have had to probably been changed. But another good reason why you should leave the snorkel in the airbox.
The jet sizes, you mentioned in the previous video that you might change the main jet to a 145 if need be.
As I said before, not every one of those engines are the same, and some of them are stain tuned, for example, or a Barrett system, because both of those are ones we use at the shop, so they're the ones I'm most experienced with. We nearly always find a bigger pilot jet works, but then you have to alter the fuel screw too. It's a matter of tuning each one of those engines to suit that pilot jet. Just don't whack a jet in and, man, that's great. And sometime with that exhaust on it, can handle a one size bigger pilot jet. sometimes it's too rich and it's no good. It'll use more fuel.
Can you just put on an aftermarket exhaust without changing the jets or without altering the carburetor? What modifications are required once you put a aftermarket exhaust on it?
You have to put it on and see what it needs. That's about the size of it. It's not a matter of, hey, this is always what's going to be when you put a different exhaust, a Yoshi on it. Depends on how the bike's running. Some of them might run perfectly good. I've seen some good stain tunes on the DRs and the bike's required nothing. It's just run just fine as it is. So it's a matter of putting it on and seeing. And that's the thing. People say, what sort of jet do you need? Well, you only need change it if it needs changing, and the only way you're going to need to change it is the experience to tell you whether it's rich or lean or running fine, or whether you can lean it out a little bit more and it'll still have the same power but use less fuel. Sometimes you need to put a bit bigger jet in it to get it to use less fuel. Now it's a bit of a
how do you
tricky
judge
one. Now don't you're gonna ask me a question now, aren't you? Yes, but the engine might not be struggling. If it's got not enough air, you're going to be opening the throttle or trying to get it to work to build revs or get more speed or more power by frigging around with the throttle where you've got the position. So if it's too lean, it still might use more fuel than if it's perfect jetted. So it doesn't necessarily mean you put a bigger jet in, it's going to run richer. Sometimes it will run better and use the same or even less fuel.
Yep.
It's just a matter of having it jetted correctly.
Yep.
I'm in California and I did a Procycle jet kit. It made a huge difference. Smoother throttle. One person did say that that it's not about having more power, that the modification is about having more responsiveness. What do you think about that?
It's a bit relative. How do you can see to the pants feel is one way of doing it. You can another way is to compare it to exactly a standard bike. And if they've been successful with that and they're happy with that, that's great. I know a flat slide carburetor will give you more response.
But you don't think cutting the spring and drilling the hole in the slide mimics a flat slide?
Yeah, it could do. It's the fiddling around. And then the ones that get it wrong and they've got to come back and do it again, or they've got to go back to standard. It's where I find the issue, you know.
Yep.
I'm happy with my engine stock, apart from a pilot jet and a stain tune and different gearing. If you can call that stock. But I know it can be made better. But with my business and with the time I've got and the stuff I do after and the fact that I like going riding and eating into my riding time gives me the shits. Yeah. So I'm real happy getting my bike to where I'm satisfied with it.
Yep.
And I know a lot of people, the big enjoyment is to actually make the thing better.
Yeah, people enjoy tinkering and so on, just changing it.
You might say, hey, why don't you just want to make your bike better? Well, I do, but the effort and the time and fuel consumption is a very important consideration as far as I'm concerned, simply because I don't want a big fat tank on my bike. I'll put as big a tank as I need, but I don't want to have to carry excess fuel. And even with excess fuel, I don't want to run out because my bike's not jetted right or isn't running right and uses more fuel. I like to get 20 kilometres to the litre. And when people get better than that, and you can get better than that if you fiddle around with it, but the ones that are getting better than 20 kilometres to the litre, that's awesome. And I'm jealous. But I'm not jealous of the ones that are getting 16 kilometres to the litre. Yeah. I don't need that. I like mine as it is. So I'm happy with, if you can make it more responsive and whatever, that's great. And response is probably a nice thing to have. I like to have the thing smooth as well. But as I said, if you're happy with your bike, excellent. I'm happy for you.
One person that commented recently mentioned that
they actually get better fuel consumption, and their theory why they get better fuel consumption is because the bike is getting more fuel and more air, right? That it doesn't have to rev as high to get the same speed, therefore runs at a lower RPM.
Revs and speed are all related to gearing. If you change your jetting, you're not going to get less revs or more revs for the same speed, because you're still going to have this, unless you change the sprockets. Because revs are related to, if you do 3,100 revs, you're going to do 100 kilometres an hour if that's the way your gearing is. Change the shit out of the jetting, you're still going to get the same speed at 3,100 revs. But you might be able to use less throttle. And that's possible, that's good.
So if you get it right, and you're good at tuning a bike and you're mechanically knowledgeable, like it is possible, in your opinion, to get better fuel consumption.
Sure. For sure. And it's all goes back to how much time you can spend, knowledge you've got. You might accidentally fluke it. That'd be even awesome. Most people, not most people, but a lot of people call me up and say, hey, I've done this, I've done that, I've watched the YouTube, and it's got this cough and a flat spot. What should I do? I don't bloody know, because I didn't do the work to it. Telephone diagnostics is not real easy.
So what you're saying, to sum up, correct me if I'm wrong, there's no right or wrong answer here. You just need to work it out, assess every different bike, and try and find what works best.
Yeah, black magic. That's pretty much it, what you said. Each bike has to be assessed individually. You know, a lot of them are pretty much the same, and universally you can say, okay, this works in this one, it'll probably work in that other one. But don't be surprised if you have to change the fuel screw position because of it, or maybe change the position of the needle.